You are not tired. You are not confused. You are over-responsive. Every message you rush to answer, every emotion you explain, every reaction you give away on impulse, you are leaking power. The world is not overwhelming you. You are volunteering access. This audiobook will teach you one discipline that changes everything. The discipline of choosing when not to respond. Because silence is not weakness, calm is not passivity, and restraint is not fear. Unresponsive by choice is how control is built, and once you learn it, nothing pulls you again.
Reaction is automatic. Choice is deliberate. That distinction alone explains why most people feel powerless. They are not making decisions. They are having reflexes. Something happens, a message arrives, a tone shifts, a comment lands, and immediately, without pause, they react. They answer too fast. They defend too quickly. They explain without being asked. They justify before anyone demands proof. And every time they do this, they lose ground. Because if it's automatic, it's not powerful. That's the key. You have been trained to believe that speed equals competence, that responsiveness equals respect, that emotional honesty equals strength. It doesn't. Speed often signals anxiety, reactivity signals lack of control, and emotional immediacy signals exposure. You have a choice, but only if you slow down enough to see it. Most people don't. They confuse impulse with instinct. They confuse urgency with importance. They confuse pressure with priority. And because of that confusion, they live in reaction mode. Reaction mode means your environment controls you, your phone controls you, other people's moods control you, their expectations control you. That's not living, that's being managed. Let's make this concrete. In the workplace, the fastest responder is rarely the most respected. They're the most available, and availability is not authority. When you reply instantly to every email, every message, every request, you teach people something about you. You teach them that you are always on call, that you are easily interrupted, that your time is flexible but not valuable. You don't need their permission to slow down. That's the key. The person who pauses before responding appears grounded, measured, intentional. Not because they're playing games, but because they're not being pulled. And power always belongs to the one who is not pulled. In relationships, reaction is even more dangerous. Someone says something sharp, accusatory, dismissive, and immediately you feel the urge to respond, to defend, to correct, to explain your intentions. But here's the truth no one tells you. The moment you react emotionally, you've accepted their frame. You're no longer choosing, you're responding inside their emotional reality. That's not strength, that's surrender. You have a choice. You can pause, you can breathe, you can say nothing. And silence, when chosen consciously, is not avoidance, it's control. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Think about conflict. Arguments don't escalate because of facts. They escalate because of speed. One reaction triggers another, then another, then another. Before you know it, the original issue is gone. All that remains is ego, tone, and emotional residue. The person who wins these situations isn't the loudest. It's the one who slows the exchange. That's the key. Slowing down doesn't mean agreeing. It doesn't mean submitting. It means refusing to be rushed into a reaction you didn't choose. You don't need their permission to pause. Most people react because they're uncomfortable with tension. Silence feels awkward. Pauses feel unsafe. Not responding feels like losing. But that discomfort is exactly where your power is hiding. Because the person who can tolerate emotional tension without reacting controls the direction of the interaction. You have a choice. Now, let's talk about the internal side of this. Reaction doesn't start with other people. It starts in your nervous system. Your body senses threat, real or imagined, and prepares to act. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, thoughts speed up. And if you've never trained yourself to interrupt that process, your mouth opens before your mind arrives. That's not character, that's conditioning. It's not about being calm, it's about being trained. You don't rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your habits. And most people have a habit of reacting. So here's the discipline. When something triggers you, do nothing at first. No reply, no explanation, no defense. Just notice the urge. That urge is not you, it's a signal, and signals are meant to be observed, not obeyed. You have a choice. Delay doesn't weaken your position, it strengthens it, because delay gives you perspective, and perspective gives you options. That's the key. Let me be clear. This is not about suppressing emotion, it's about sequencing. Feel first, choose second, respond last, if at all. Most people reverse that order. They respond first, then feel, then regret. That's why they're constantly apologizing, explaining, backtracking. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Power begins when you interrupt the automatic. From now on, your default state is pause. Not silence forever, not avoidance. Pause. A breath, a moment, a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where choice lives. That gap is where authority is built. And once you realize you have that gap, everything changes. You stop being pulled into unnecessary conversations. You stop feeding emotional hooks. You stop leaking energy to situations that don't deserve it. You don't need their permission to choose yourself. That's the key. By the end of this audiobook, unresponsiveness will no longer feel uncomfortable. It will feel natural. But it starts here. You stop reacting. You start choosing. Because the moment you choose your response, you take your power back. And once you take it back, you don't give it away easily. You've learned the foundation. Now it's time to understand who actually deserves access to you.
Most people give emotional access away like it's a social obligation. They explain themselves. They justify their feelings. They respond to every tone, every mood, every demand. Not because it's necessary, but because they've been trained to believe they owe it. They don't. Emotional access is not automatic. It is not polite behavior. It is not a moral duty. It is earned. That's the key. Every time you explain how you feel to someone who hasn't earned the right to hear it, you weaken your position. Because explanation is exposure, and exposure without trust is vulnerability without protection. You have a choice. Most people never realize this because they confuse communication with connection. They think responding equals respect. They think openness equals maturity. They think emotional availability equals strength. It doesn't. Strength is selectivity. If everyone can access your emotions have no value. That's not arrogance, that's economics. Scarcity creates worth. Let's talk about real life. In the workplace, emotional access is a liability. When you over-explain your stress, your frustration, your doubts to the wrong people, you don't look human, you look unstable. Not because emotions are bad, but because hierarchy exists whether you like it or not. The moment you emotionally vent downward, sideways, or indiscriminately, you collapse your authority. You don't need their permission to stay composed. That's the key. Professional environments reward emotional restraint, not emotional transparency. Not because they're cold, but because clarity requires control.
The person who stays regulated under pressure becomes the reference point. The one who spills emotions becomes the burden. You have a choice. In relationships, the cost is even higher. When someone has unrestricted emotional access to you, they stop respecting your boundaries. They expect explanations. They expect reassurance. They expect emotional labor on demand. And the moment you hesitate, they accuse you of changing. You didn't change, you matured. If they panic when access is reduced, it's because they were feeding on it. That's the key. Not everyone who wants your emotions deserves them. Some people want access so they can control the tone of the relationship. They provoke to extract reactions. They push to test availability. They withdraw to trigger explanations. And if you keep responding, you reward the behavior. What you respond to, you reinforce. You have a choice. Now let's be precise. Emotional access is not about shutting down. It's about qualification. Who gets access? People who are consistent. People who take responsibility. People who don't weaponize your honesty against you. Everyone else gets distance. Not cruelty, not punishment. Distance. That's discipline. Most people give emotional access too early. They explain their intentions to strangers. They justify their boundaries to manipulators. They open up to people who haven't proven stability. That's not bravery, that's poor filtering. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. The moment someone demands an explanation from you, ask yourself one question. Have they earned it? Not do they want it, not will it calm them, not will it make things easier in the moment. Have they earned it? That's the key. Because explanations given to unqualified people don't create understanding, they create leverage. The more you explain, the more material you hand over, and emotionally immature people will always misuse that material. You don't need their permission to protect yourself. Let's talk about guilt. Most people keep emotional access open because they're afraid of being seen as cold. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of being misunderstood. They're afraid of losing connection. But connection built on constant explanation is not connection. It's dependency. And dependency is fragile. Strong bonds don't require constant emotional proof. They're stable, they're calm, they're grounded. You have a choice. Here's the behavioral discipline. When someone pushes for emotional access, pause. Don't explain immediately. Don't justify your tone. Don't clarify your intention. Observe. If they respect the pause, they may be qualified. If they escalate, pressure, guilt, or accuse, you have your answer. That's the key. Qualified people respect boundaries. Unqualified people challenge them. Silence reveals which is which. This is why unresponsiveness feels threatening to others. It removes their access. And when access is removed, people show their true motives. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. Read that again. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. You are responsible for managing your own. Everything else is overreach. It's not about being kind, it's about being clean. Clean boundaries, clean responses, clean energy. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. From now on, emotional access follows behavior. Not history, not titles, not time spent. Behavior. Consistency earns access. Respect maintains access. Violation revokes access. You don't need to announce this. You don't need to explain it. You just live it, and people will feel it. That's the key. As you reduce emotional access, something interesting happens. Your words carry more weight. Your silence creates gravity. Your presence stabilizes the room. Because when you stop giving everything away, what remains becomes valuable. This is not about becoming distant. It's about becoming selective. You've learned how to stop reacting. You've learned that access is earned. Now it's time to understand why speed, especially fast responses, signals weakness. You've built the boundary. Next, we sharpen the signal.
Speed feels powerful, but most of the time it isn't. It feels efficient. It feels responsible. It feels impressive. And that's exactly why it misleads people. Fast responses are rarely about clarity. They are about pressure. Pressure to be seen. Pressure to be needed. Pressure to prove relevance. And pressure is not power. That's the key. The moment you respond too fast, you reveal something. Not intelligence, not competence. You reveal availability. And availability, when uncontrolled, lowers your position. You have a choice. Let's remove the illusion. In high-stakes environments, negotiations, leadership, influence, the person who responds last often controls the frame. Not because they are slow, but because they are not rushed. They are processing, observing, choosing. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Fast responses tell people you were waiting. Waiting for the message, waiting for the approval, waiting for the moment to engage. And when someone senses that you were waiting, they sense leverage. That's the key. Think about email. The employee who replies within seconds to every message trains others to expect immediate access. Their inbox becomes a doorway. Anyone can walk in, anytime. The leader who responds deliberately, sometimes immediately, sometimes later, controls rhythm. And rhythm is authority. You don't need their permission to respond on your time. Now think about relationships. Fast replies feel like interest at first. Then they feel like need. Because consistency without selectivity turns into predictability. And predictability kills respect. People value what they cannot instantly access. That's not manipulation. That's human psychology. You have a choice. This chapter is not telling you to play games. It's telling you to stop broadcasting urgency. Urgency says, this matters more to me than it should. And the moment that imbalance appears, your position weakens. That's the key. Fast emotional responses are even more damaging. When someone sends a message with an edge, a complaint, or a provocation, and you reply instantly, you signal reactivity. You show them they touched something. You show them where the nerve is. And once a nerve is visible, it will be tested, again and again. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Powerful people absorb information first. They let the emotion pass through their system. They don't respond from the spike, they respond from the baseline. That delay is not hesitation, it's discipline. You have a choice. Let's talk about leverage. Leverage comes from options. If you respond instantly, you show that this interaction was your only option in that moment. If you delay, you imply a full life. Multiple priorities, multiple demands. And perception shapes reality. That's the key. People treat you differently when they sense you are not waiting on them. Not colder, more careful, more respectful. Now here's the mistake people make. They hear this and think, I'll just respond late to everything. That's not discipline, that's avoidance. Discipline is intentional variance. Sometimes you respond quickly because it serves your objective. Sometimes you wait because it strengthens your position. The key is that you decide, not the pressure. You don't need their permission to set the pace. Here's the behavioral rule. When a message arrives, don't ask, how fast should I reply? Ask, what response timing serves my position? That question alone changes everything,
because it removes emotion from the decision. That's the key. Urgency is often manufactured. People mark messages urgent to bypass boundaries. They create emotional pressure to gain access. When you respond instantly, you validate that pressure. When you pause, you neutralize it. You have a choice. Silence does not mean neglect. It means evaluation. It means you are not controlled by incoming stimuli. And the more you practice this, the calmer your internal state becomes. Because your nervous system stops living on alert. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. The strongest people are not the fastest. They are the most deliberate. They move when it matters. They wait when it matters more. They don't explain the delay. They don't apologize for choosing. They just act. That's the key. As you slow your responses, something shifts. Your words gain weight. Your presence gains gravity. Your time gains value. Because speed is common, deliberation is rare. You've learned to pause. You've learned to protect access. You've learned to control speed. Now it's time to understand what happens when you say nothing at all. Because silence is not empty. It is a mirror.
Silence is never empty. It only feels that way to people who need noise to feel in control. When you stop responding, something happens. Not to you, to them. That's the key. Most people think silence is passive. It isn't. Silence is active pressure. It removes feedback. It removes reassurance. It removes emotional fuel. And when fuel is removed, behavior is exposed. You have a choice. When you speak, you guide the interaction. But when you stay silent, the other person fills the space. With assumptions, with projections, with their own insecurities. Silence doesn't hide truth, it reveals it. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Let's break this down. When you don't respond immediately, emotionally immature people panic. They start over-explaining. They double-text. They escalate the tone. Not because you did something wrong, but because the mirror turned on. They are now alone with their thoughts, and many people can't tolerate that. That's the key. Silence forces self-confrontation. Calm people use it naturally. Reactive people fear it deeply. In arguments, silence is misunderstood. People think whoever speaks last wins. Wrong. Whoever stays regulated wins. When someone provokes you and you don't respond, you deny them confirmation. They wanted anger. They wanted defense. They wanted engagement. You gave them none, and now they're exposed to their own behavior. You have a choice. Silence does not mean agreement. It does not mean weakness. It does not mean submission. It means you refuse to play on a field you didn't choose. That's power. Think about manipulation. Manipulation requires feedback loops. Push, reaction, adjustment, push again. Silence breaks the loop. No data, no adjustment, no control. That's the key. People who rely on emotional tactics become clumsy when silence appears. They try harder, they get louder, they become obvious. Because silence strips them of subtlety. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Now let's talk about projection. When you don't explain yourself, others explain you to themselves. They assign motives, they invent narratives, they reveal fears. And here's the discipline. You don't correct those narratives immediately, because correction is not always required. Sometimes misinformation is diagnostic. It shows you who you're dealing with. You have a choice. If someone assumes the worst because you didn't reply, that tells you something about them. If someone stays calm and respectful in the absence of response, that also tells you something. Silence separates the stable from the unstable. That's the key. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. You're used to managing perception. You're used to smooth intention, clarifying intent, reducing discomfort. But every time you rush to explain, you block the mirror. You protect others from seeing themselves, and that costs you clarity. Silence creates information, more than words ever could. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Now let's be precise. Silence must be intentional, not sulking, not ghosting, not avoidance. Intentional silence is calm, grounded, and neutral. It says nothing but communicates everything. I am not rushed. I am not reactive. I am observing. That's the key. Here's the behavioral rule. When provoked, wait. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to see. Watch what fills the space. Do they respect it? Do they pressure it? Do they collapse into emotion? Their response to your silence is the data. You don't need their permission to observe. Most people talk themselves out of credibility when silence is applied. They reveal entitlement, insecurity, control issues, and all you did was nothing. That's real leverage. You have a choice. As you practice this, you'll notice something else. Your internal state changes. You become less urgent, less defensive, less needy. Because you no longer rely on immediate resolution to feel stable. You can sit in uncertainty, and people who can sit in uncertainty without reacting are dangerous in the best way. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Silence sharpens discernment. It shows you who respects boundaries, who seeks control, who needs validation. And once you see that clearly, your responses become surgical, minimal, precise, effective. You don't speak to be understood, you speak because it serves a purpose. That's the key. You've learned to pause, you've learned to control speed, you've learned to let silence reflect truth. Now it's time to address the most common mistake people make after learning this. They start explaining silence, and that destroys its power. Next, we remove that habit. It is a mirror.
Most explanations are not communication. They are defense. Defense against judgment, defense against misunderstanding, defense against the fear of being disliked. That's the key. When you explain yourself to people who haven't earned the right to understand you, you are not clarifying, you are lowering your position. Because explanation is an invitation to question, to debate, to reinterpret. And not everyone deserves that access. You have a choice. Most people explain automatically. Someone raises an eyebrow, someone sounds disappointed, someone hints at disapproval, and immediately the explanation comes out. I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to... What I meant was, if it's automatic, it's not powerful. Powerful people don't rush to be understood by everyone. They let understanding be earned. Let's define qualification. Qualified people share responsibility. They show consistency. They handle information with care. Unqualified people react emotionally. They twist context. They collect explanations as ammunition. That's the key. Every time you explain yourself to an unqualified person, you give them leverage. You give them context they can distort, intent they can question, emotion they can exploit. And then you wonder why conversations feel exhausting. It's because you're over-investing in the wrong audience. You have a choice. Think about the workplace. When a leader over-explains decisions to people who don't carry the weight of those decisions, authority erodes. Not because transparency is bad, but because explanation without responsibility creates entitlement. People start believing they deserve influence without accountability. That's dangerous. You don't need their permission to decide. That's the key. Strong leaders explain up and across to those who share consequence. They don't explain down to manage emotions. They communicate outcomes. They set expectations. They move forward. Explanation is not the same as communication. In relationships, the pattern is even clearer. Unqualified people demand explanations. They say things like, "Why are you being distant? Why didn't you reply? What changed?" But notice, they're not asking to understand. They're asking to regain access. That's the key. The moment you explain, you validate the demand. You accept the premise that you owe them access. You don't. You have a choice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If someone reacts badly to your boundary, they were benefiting from the absence of one. Explanation won't fix that. It will only prolong it. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Now let's talk about justification. Justification is explanation's weaker cousin. It sounds like reasoning, but it's actually self-defense. I had a long day. I was busy. I didn't mean to upset you. These phrases don't resolve anything. They teach people that pressure works, that if they push, you'll explain. That's the key. From now on, your explanations are conditional. They require trust. They require maturity. They require respect. If someone doesn't meet those standards, they get simplicity. Not rudeness, not aggression, simplicity. Short statements, clear boundaries, no emotional footnotes. You don't need their permission to be brief. Here's the behavioral discipline. When someone questions your choice, pause. Ask yourself, is this person responsible for this outcome? Do they act in good faith? Will this explanation improve the situation or just soothe them? If the answer is no, stop. That's the key. Silence or simplicity is often the correct response. I've decided. This works for me. I'm not discussing this further. No elaboration. Not because you can't explain, because you don't need to. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Notice what happens next. Unqualified people escalate. They guilt. They accuse. They dramatize. That escalation is confirmation. Qualified people respect clarity. They may disagree, but they don't demand emotional access. You have a choice. Most people are afraid of being misunderstood, but being misunderstood by the wrong people is not a problem. It's a filter, and filters protect energy. As you stop explaining, your presence changes. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to drain. Your words carry weight because there are fewer of them. That's the key. You've learned to pause. You've learned to use silence. You've learned to withhold explanation. Now it's time to understand where all of this truly originates. Not in mindset, not in willpower, but in your biology. Because control starts in the body.
Most people think power is psychological. It isn't. Power is biological. Before a thought forms, before a word is chosen, before a decision is made, your nervous system has already decided how you will show up. That's the key. You don't react because you're weak-minded. You react because your body is untrained. Heart rate spikes, breathing shortens, muscles tense, and in that state, choice disappears. You have a choice, but only if your nervous system allows it. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Let's be direct. The person with the calmest nervous system in the room sets the tone. Not the smartest, not the loudest, not the most emotional, the calmest. That's not philosophy, that's hierarchy. In every workplace, every relationship, every conflict, rank is decided by regulation. The regulated lead, the dysregulated follow. That's the key. When someone raises their voice and you stay grounded, something shifts. They feel it, they adjust. When someone pressures you and your breathing stays slow, their urgency loses force. When chaos hits and you remain steady, people look to you, not consciously, instinctively. You have a choice, but that choice is only available if your nervous system is trained. Most people live in chronic activation, always alert, always reactive, always one message away from agitation. They call it productivity. It's not. It's dysregulation. And dysregulation makes you predictable. Predictable people are easy to control. That's the key. Now let's talk about triggers. A trigger is not an external event, it's an internal overreaction. Someone interrupts you, someone questions you, someone delays a response. Your body interprets it as threat, and suddenly you're no longer choosing, you're responding. You have a choice, but only if your nervous system allows it. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. This is why mindset alone fails. You can tell yourself to stay calm all day, but if your breathing is shallow and your muscles are tight, your system will override your intentions. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Powerful people train their baseline. They don't wait for stress to appear, they prepare for it. Here's the discipline. Slow breathing is not relaxation, it's regulation. Long exhales tell the nervous system there is no immediate threat. That message travels faster than logic. That's the key. When your breathing slows, your perception widens. You see options, you hear tone, you sense timing, and suddenly reaction is no longer the default. Choice appears. You have a choice. Posture matters. A collapsed body signals submission to yourself and others. An upright, grounded posture stabilizes the nervous system, not for appearance, for control. Stillness is not passive, it's containment. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Now understand this. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing feeling, it's about capacity. How much sensation can you hold without acting on it? Can you sit with discomfort without explaining, with tension without reacting, with uncertainty without filling the space? That capacity determines your rank. People who cannot tolerate internal discomfort outsource it. They argue, they justify, they rush. People who can tolerate it become anchors. That's the key. In negotiations, the person who can sit in silence wins. In relationships, the person who doesn't chase equilibrium controls it. In leadership, the person who stays regulated under pressure becomes the standard. You don't need their permission to regulate yourself. Most people think calm is personality. It's not. It's training. Your nervous system can be conditioned, daily, deliberately. That's the difference. Here's the behavioral instruction. When pressure hits, do less. Don't speak immediately. Don't move unnecessarily. Don't explain. Slow the body first. Breathe out longer than you breathe in. Feel your feet. Lower your shoulders. Then decide. That sequence matters. Body first, choice second, response last. That's the key. If you reverse it, you react. If you follow it, you lead. As your nervous system stabilizes, your presence changes. Your voice slows, your words shorten, your reactions disappear, and people feel it. They may not know why, but they respect it, because regulation signals safety, and safety creates authority. You've learned that reaction is biological. You've learned that calm is trained. You've learned that rank is regulated. Now it's time to see what happens when others realize they can predict you, because predictability is not comfort, it's vulnerability.
The moment people can predict you, they can control you. That's not opinion, that's strategy. Predictability feels safe, it feels reliable, it feels fair, and it quietly removes your leverage. That's the key. Most people are predictable because they are emotional. They respond the same way every time. They get triggered by the same tones. They explain under the same pressure. And once a pattern is visible, it gets used. You have a choice. Predictable people are easy to manipulate, not because they are stupid, but because they are consistent in reaction, not in principle. Consistency without discipline becomes a weakness. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Let's talk about real life. In the workplace, predictable employees are managed easily. Not respected more, managed more. If people know you'll always say yes, they stop asking politely. If they know criticism rattles you, they use it strategically. If they know urgency moves you, they manufacture it. That's the key. Your reactions teach people how to treat you. Every time. In relationships, predictability is even more costly. If someone knows that withdrawal makes you chase, they will withdraw. If they know silence makes you explain, they will go quiet. If they know anger makes you defensive, they will provoke. Not always consciously, but always effectively. You have a choice. This is why emotional discipline matters. It breaks patterns. When your response changes, the dynamic changes. When your reaction disappears, the game collapses. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Powerful people are not chaotic. They are unreadable. Not deceptive, not manipulative. Unreadable because they don't leak emotion on cue. Their reactions are not tied to external pressure. That's the key. Unpredictability is not randomness. It's selective engagement. Sometimes you respond quickly. Sometimes you don't respond at all. Sometimes you engage deeply. Sometimes you disengage completely. And the decision is internal. You don't need their permission to change the pattern. Most people are afraid to be unpredictable because they fear backlash. They fear being misunderstood. They fear conflict. They fear losing approval. But approval is not power. And predictability is often the price people pay for comfort. You have a choice. Here's the behavioral shift. Stop reacting the same way to the same trigger. If criticism always makes you explain, stop explaining. If silence always makes you anxious, embrace it. If urgency always makes you rush, slow down. That interruption is everything. That's the key. People will notice. They'll feel off balance. Not because you're wrong, but because the script changed. And when the script changes, control resets. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. This is why disciplined people feel intimidating. Not because they're aggressive, because they're hard to read. You can't pull them with emotion. You can't rush them with pressure. You can't corner them with expectation. They decide. You have a choice. Predictability is comfortable for others. Unpredictability is comfortable for you because it means you are no longer living on reflex. You are living on choice. And choice is power. That's the key. As you break predictability, you'll notice something else. People test you. They push old buttons. They repeat old tactics. Stay steady. Because the testing phase is temporary. Once people realize the pattern is gone, they adapt, or they leave. Both outcomes are wins. You've learned to regulate your body. You've learned to control response speed. You've learned to break patterns. Now it's time to correct a dangerous misunderstanding. Many people think detachment means coldness. It doesn't. It means mastery. Detachment is misunderstood. People think it means you don't care. They think it means you're distant. They think it means you've shut down. It doesn't. Detachment means you are no longer controlled by what you feel. That's the key. Coldness is numbness. Detachment is clarity. Coldness avoids emotion. Detachment observes emotion without obeying it. You have a choice. Most people are attached. Attached to outcomes, attached to approval, attached to how others perceive them. And attachment creates pressure. Pressure to explain, pressure to react, pressure to fix things immediately. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Detachment removes that pressure, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped needing. That's mastery. Let's talk about why people fear detachment. They fear losing connection. They fear being seen as heartless. They fear being abandoned. But what they're really afraid of is losing control over how others feel about them. That's the key. Attachment is often disguised control. You stay emotionally hooked so you can influence the outcome. You chase clarity so you can reduce uncertainty. You over-communicate so you can manage perception. Detachment ends that cycle. You have a choice.
In relationships, detachment is essential. Without it, love turns into anxiety. You monitor tone, you analyze timing, you personalize everything, and slowly the relationship becomes work. Detachment doesn't mean disengagement. It means you stop micromanaging the emotional environment. You allow space, and space reveals truth. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Detached people don't chase reassurance. They don't demand clarity. They don't collapse when things feel uncertain. They stay centered. That centered state is attractive because stability is rare. That's the key. In conflict, detachment is dominance. When someone is emotional and you remain neutral, the imbalance is obvious, not because you're superior, but because you're regulated. They're in the storm, you're watching the weather, and the person watching always has the advantage. You have a choice. Most people think responding emotionally shows sincerity. It doesn't. It shows entanglement. Entanglement clouds judgment. Detachment sharpens it. That's mastery. Let's clarify something important. Detachment is not indifference. You still care, not outcomes. You just don't let outcomes control your nervous system. You still feel emotion. You just don't let emotion dictate behavior. That separation is everything. That's the key. Here's the discipline. When something matters deeply to you, slow down. The more important the situation, the less reactive you must become. Urgency destroys accuracy. Emotion distorts perception. Detachment restores perspective. You have a choice. This is why high-level performers look calm in critical moments. They are not less invested, they are more disciplined. They know that control comes from distance, not immersion. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Detached people listen more than they speak. They watch patterns. They note inconsistencies. They gather data. Because they're not busy defending a self-image. They're focused on reality. That's the key. As you practice detachment, people may accuse you of being cold. Let them. That accusation usually comes from those who benefited from your emotional availability. When access is reduced, entitlement reacts. That reaction is confirmation. You don't need their permission to be composed. Detachment is not something you announce, it's something you embody. Shorter responses, slower movements, fewer explanations, calm presence. And over time, people adjust, or they exit. Both are clean outcomes. You have a choice. Detachment gives you leverage, because when you are not emotionally dependent on a response, you can choose the best one, or none at all. And none is often the most powerful option. That's mastery. You've learned to regulate your body. You've learned to break predictability. You've learned to detach without disconnecting. Now it's time to understand what truly drains people. Not work, not pressure, but attention given without intention. Because attention is currency.
Attention is not free. You just treat it like it is. That's the key. Every time you engage, you pay. Every time you respond, you invest. Every time you explain, you spend. And most people are bankrupt, not because they lack time, but because they spend attention without intention. You have a choice. Attention is the most valuable asset you have. Not money, not status, not energy. Attention. Because whatever holds your attention controls your behavior. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Most people hand attention to the loudest voice, the angriest message, the most urgent demand, the most emotional person. And by doing that, they reinforce chaos. They train others to interrupt them. That's the key. What you give attention to grows. Ignore that truth, and your life fills with noise. Understand it, and you regain control. Let's make this practical. In the workplace, attention defines hierarchy. Who gets access to you? Who gets replies? Who gets meetings? Those decisions signal rank. When you give unlimited attention,
you lower your value. Scarcity creates gravity. You don't need their permission to be selective. Most people respond to everything because they fear missing out. But constant engagement is not productivity, it's reactivity. And reactivity is expensive. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. In relationships, attention is emotional currency. When you respond instantly, consistently, and emotionally, you inflate availability. And inflated availability kills desire. Not because people don't care, but because they stop valuing. Attention without standards creates entitlement. That's the key. People don't respect what they can constantly access. They respect what has boundaries. You have a choice. Now understand this. Attention is not only what you give, it's also what you withhold. Silence is an attention decision. So is delay. So is disengagement. These are not absences, they are strategies. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Most people don't realize how much attention they waste on arguments that go nowhere, people who never change, thoughts that spiral. You don't owe your attention to any of it. That's the key. Here's the discipline. Before engaging, ask one question. Is this worth my attention? Not is it loud, not is it urgent, not is it emotional. Is it aligned with my priorities? If the answer is no, don't engage. You have a choice. Attention is how you teach people to treat you. If you respond to disrespect, you validate it. If you respond to chaos, you normalize it. If you respond to emotional manipulation, you reward it. What you respond to, you reinforce. That's the key. Deliberate attention changes dynamics. When you stop feeding low-value interactions, they disappear. When you invest attention selectively, your presence becomes meaningful. People lean in because attention is felt. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. This is why powerful people look calm. They are not distracted. They are not scattered. They are focused. Focus is not intensity. It's exclusion. You remove what doesn't matter. You protect what does. You have a choice. Attention discipline reduces emotional exhaustion because most exhaustion comes from over-engagement. Too many conversations, too many explanations, too many reactions. When you spend less attention, you feel more energy. That's the key. As you master attention, silence becomes easier. Detachment becomes natural, and reactivity fades because you are no longer feeding it. You've learned to value your attention. You've learned to spend it deliberately. Now it's time to confront what destroys attention faster than anything else. Anger. Because anger makes you transparent.
Anger feels powerful. It isn't. Anger feels like strength, like clarity, like action. But anger does one thing extremely well. It reveals you. That's the key. The moment anger shows up, your inner world leaks out. Your triggers, your expectations, your insecurities. And once those are visible, you are no longer in control. You have a choice. Anger removes ambiguity. It shows people exactly where to press. If someone wants to destabilize you, anger gives them the map. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. People don't fear angry individuals, they understand them. Because anger is predictable. Raised voice, sharpened tone, fast reactions. Once someone knows that pattern, they can recreate it, again and again. That's the key. Calm, on the other hand, is unreadable. Calm gives nothing away. No map, no buttons, no leverage. That's why calm people feel intimidating. Not because they dominate, but because they don't expose. You have a choice. Let's talk about real situations.
In arguments, anger hands control to the other person. The angrier you become, the less precise your words get. You exaggerate, you generalize, you lose accuracy. And accuracy is power. Anger trades accuracy for release. That trade is always a loss. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. In negotiations, anger is fatal. The moment you show frustration, you show desire. You show attachment to outcome, and attachment weakens position. That's the key. The calm negotiator can wait, the angry one cannot. In relationships, anger confuses intensity with honesty. People think, at least they care, but care expressed through anger is unstable. It erodes trust, because anger is volatile. You never know when it will show up. You have a choice. Anger is not the problem. Uncontrolled anger is. Suppressed anger leaks sideways. Exploded anger burns bridges. Disciplined anger transforms into clarity. That's mastery. Here's the discipline. When anger appears, pause. Not to suppress, not to vent, to observe. Where's it in the body? What story is fueling it? What outcome are you attached to? That pause breaks the transparency. That's the key. Anger wants immediate action. Delay disarms it. Slow breathing reduces its intensity. Silence removes its audience. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Powerful people do not announce their anger. They convert it. They use it as data. Something important was threatened. Something meaningful was crossed. But the response is still chosen. You have a choice. When anger appears, pause. Not to suppress, not to vent, to observe. Delay disarms it. Silence removes its audience. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Notice this. The angrier you are, the more you talk. You explain, you justify, you escalate. And with every word, you give more information away. Calm people say less, because they don't need to convince. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Here's the rule. Never respond while angry. Not because anger is bad, but because anger is loud, and loud emotions drown out strategy. You don't need their permission to wait. As you master anger, your presence changes. People stop provoking you, stop testing you, stop pushing. Because they don't get a reaction. And without reaction, there is no reward. You've learned to protect attention. You've learned to control emotion. Now it's time to think long-term. Because calm people don't win moments, they win outcomes.
Reactive people win moments. Calm people win outcomes. That's the key. A moment feels satisfying. An outcome changes your life. Most people sacrifice the long game for short relief. They react to feel better now. They speak to release tension now. They act to regain comfort now. And by doing that, they lose later. You have a choice. Calm is not passive. Calm is strategic patience. It is the ability to delay emotional relief in exchange for long-term leverage. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. The long game requires restraint because the long game is invisible. There's no applause for silence, no validation for waiting, no immediate reward for discipline. That's why most people don't play it. They want proof now. Calm people don't. That's the key. Look at leadership. The reactive leader addresses every complaint, responds to every emotion, fixes every discomfort, and becomes exhausted. The calm leader absorbs pressure. They don't rush to soothe. They don't chase consensus. They don't confuse noise with signal. They let patterns reveal themselves, and then they act once decisively. You have a choice. In relationships, calm wins trust, not intensity, not drama, not emotional displays. Consistency. People feel safe around those who don't swing emotionally, safe enough to be honest, safe enough to stay, safe enough to respect boundaries. That safety compounds. That's the long game. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Reactive people burn bridges and rebuild them repeatedly. Calm people build once and maintain, because they don't destroy connection during emotional spikes. They don't say things they can't take back. They don't trade the future for the present. That's the key. In conflict, calm reframes everything. The reactive person tries to win the argument. The calm person aims to shape the relationship. Arguments end, dynamics remain, and dynamics determine outcomes. You have a choice. Calm gives you time to observe, time to adjust, time to choose the best move, not the fastest. Speed feels like action, but patience is positioning. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. The long game rewards people who can sit with discomfort, unanswered questions, unresolved tension, delayed outcomes. Most people rush to close loops. Calm people let loops stay open until clarity arrives. That's the key. This is why calm feels threatening to emotional people. It doesn't rush to reassure. It doesn't react to pressure. It doesn't validate urgency. It waits, and waiting exposes motives. You have a choice. Long-term power is boring. It's quiet. It's repetitive. It's disciplined. No dramatic gestures, no emotional speeches, just consistency, day after day. That's why it works. If it's automatic, it's not powerful. Calm people understand compounding. Small, disciplined responses repeated over time create massive leverage. Reactive people reset constantly. They apologize, they explain, they recover. Calm people progress. That's the difference. Now here's the shift. Once you realize you're playing the long game, you stop explaining short-term moves. You don't justify pauses. You don't defend silence. You don't announce strategy. You let results speak. That's the key. Calm creates reputation. People begin to expect stability from you. They stop testing, stop provoking, stop rushing you, because they know it won't work. You don't need their permission to play long-term. As this becomes your default, you'll notice something powerful. You stop needing closure. Because closure is often a short-game addiction, a desire to feel resolved now. But control doesn't come from closure. It comes from position, and position is built over time. You've learned that calm wins outcomes. You've learned that patience compounds power. Now it's time to dismantle one of the biggest traps that keeps people reactive, the need for closure.
You've heard the truth now. Not theory, not motivation, strategy. Power is not louder reactions. It is fewer responses. From this moment forward, you pause. You choose. You stop volunteering explanations, emotions, and urgency. Let others rush. Let others overreact. Let others exhaust themselves chasing clarity. You will be still. You will be selective. You will be unresponsive by choice. And here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, respond slower than usual. Explain nothing unless required. Observe everything. You won't lose people. You'll lose weakness. And once you feel that control, you will never go back.